Welcome into the M&M Discipleship Podcast, where we discuss what it means to be a disciple of Christ. We aim to look for God in our daily lives, be in His Word, and strive to live out the teachings of Jesus. This is Michael Round, and this is my co-host, Dakota Moody. How you doing, man?
I'm doing excellent this morning for this very special episode. But I'm very excited for it, very excited about what we're doing, and having a very good morning.
Well, so yeah, I am too. And why is it a special episode? What number is it now?
We are at the big 20. We are at episode number 20, 20% through an 100 episode uh, goal that we hopefully can have at some point. But yeah, we've reached 20 episodes and you all haven't left us yet. In fact, not only have you not left us, but many of you have joined us through these 20 episodes. And we're so thankful to so many of you who have began your journey with us and have stuck with us through these 20 episodes or have joined us along the way. And we're really appreciative of the growth that we've seen in our podcast numbers, all those who are listening and those who are hopefully growing a deeper faith because of this the 30 minutes at a time you end up spending with us each week.
Well, in 20 episodes, I mean that's 5 months. We're getting close to half a year that it represents that we've been creating these, and the more we are in something like this, the stronger the habits get. And
That's
so
right.
we're certainly glad that you have made this a part of your routine, and we hope that you will continue to join us for that. So, any other exciting things? I know that Dakota wants to make fun of me, so we'll let him go ahead. All the tech things that we've been doing to try and make it better over the months.
Well, I mean, you've all seen how things have grown, and if some of you have followed along since all the way back whenever we were doing sometimes like our biblical videos and stuff, you can see the video quality changing, the audio visual quality changing. But even within this podcast, if you've been listening to the last 20 episodes, sometimes I know you've probably been listening and thinking, "Oh man, how bad is Michael's audio?" But we finally got that figured out because he stopped messing with the volume button, which was actually for the headsets that could be plugged into the microphone, and he actually started adjusting the gain, which actually controls what gets taken into his microphone. But we were able to do that, and now you probably go, "Oh man, he sounds so much better now," because we finally got that figured out.
Well, I mean, yeah. In my defense, I don't have much audio experience,
No, this is
but I
this
guess
is
too,
very
like,
true.
we did that during COVID. We started making videos during COVID.
This is
So it's
very true.
been almost 4 years now. We've been doing
Yes,
videos together.
this is
That's
very
kind of
true.
cool.
Yeah, no,
And if
that's
you want a
that's
good laugh, feel free to go back and look at old stuff on YouTube. YouTube's probably the best place to find it, either his channel or mine.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can find some of those old videos in that way of us doing this. But I'll also say this excuse given to Michael for his audio quality. This is a hand-me-down mic he's got. It was just in a closet in his church somewhere. It didn't come with an instruction manual. He didn't, go through all the video tutorials and stuff. So he's just kind of figuring out on the fly, right? I bought mine and I had to read all the manuals and the warranties and the this and that. So he didn't have that experience. And so, it's understandable. It's understandable that you've had to kind of learn as we've gone along. But all that matters is that you figured it out now.
Well, something that other ministers will relate to is how we've had to wear so many hats. Like during COVID, you had to figure out how to shoot video, you had to figure out how to edit video, had to figure out all these different things. So, any other ministers out there or people that had their job had to change during COVID, we have become experts in all these things.
This is very true. Yeah, this is very true. Especially, I mean, if you were at yeah, different congregations that while maybe you have people who are very tech oriented, your congregation, like they're having to do tech stuff for so many other things that are in their work and their careers and their jobs, stuff like that. And it kind of left us to have to figure out like how do we create content for our congregation in the modern world with COVID and everything else, and it has made us all be a lot more tech savvy than we used to be.
Well, and speaking of with that, if you guys have any suggestions on what you would like us to study, we're toward the end of the Sermon on the Mount. We're on the last chapter. And so if you have Bible suggestions of passages to discuss, I mean, we could even do topics. Maybe if there's a particular topic you want, we could study that book of the Bible or a chapter or whatever. So if you have suggestions, we'd love to hear them. So comment on our Facebook posts or on YouTube or wherever you're listening from, and we'll try and address those if we can. Anything
Yes.
else? Any old business?
Not really too much old business, my friend. I think it's time for us to kind of continue because frankly, we promised this episode at the end of last week's episode because we ran out of time a little bit. We didn't really get to do justice to what you wanted to finish talking about, which was the book that you've been reading and how that's influencing our conversation and the connections about that with our culture and society. And instead of us trying to rush 3 minutes into an already long episode where we went like 32 or 33 minutes last week. We wanted to take a special time in this special episode, our 20th episode, um, to dedicate an entire podcast to this particular topic that I'll allow you to reference in regards to your book and what you've been reading.
Yeah. So I've been going through American Gospel. I finished it last week, and it's by John Meacham. It's more of a historian's perspective on religion in America. Excuse me. And he talked about how so much of religion in America is religious freedom and an acknowledgement that there is a God, but not necessarily a specific God. Thomas Jefferson mentioned it as nature's God and the creator. So very generic terms, allowing for people of other faiths to coexist. And really one of the ways in which America has been special is it has allowed people over the years to become this melting pot. Well, a part of that, he said on page 179 of my particular edition, John Meacham said, serious believers will always find public religion wanting lighter on substance, perhaps, than they would like, or vague to the point of meaninglessness. But part of the American gospel is that such lamentation should take place in churches or homes, not in the public arena. So his point is if you are a serious believer, what the public does and what the culture does is never going to be to your level of satisfaction. They're never going to be far enough because the public religion and religion and culture is much more understanding and much more tolerant. And our genuine faith should be exercised in every arena that we enter. But we have to understand that there are people in our country that do not believe as we do. Our country is not a church. So I think this really was sparked by the He Gets Us ads. People on every spectrum had some kind of, if you had an issue with it, had certain kinds of issues. They spent too much money. It didn't share the right message. It wasn't far enough. It was too far. And that's just the nature of public religion, things that are done out in the public sphere. They're never going to be exactly what a serious believer wants, but that's kind of the nature of America. What are your thoughts on that, Dakota?
Well, yeah, and as regards that, and we promised a little bit last week's episode that we would talk a little bit more, make a little bit more comments about kind of referencing that ad and the way that people felt about it because um there's a lot of people who had obviously a lot of different opinions about it. And we talked a little bit about last week about people who had issues with the money that was spent on it. But I think a serious conversation could also be had about those who thought there wasn't enough substance to it, and they're trying to introduce really more than anything with that ad, they're trying to introduce Jesus to people who are either non-religious or spiritual, seeking somebody, and they're trying to introduce Jesus. And the way that they were doing that more than anything is they are illustrating the love that Jesus had and showed. And one of the most powerful examples, obviously, that Jesus gave of love was washing feet. He washed the feet of his disciples. And specifically, it's one thing to wash the feet of your disciples, but Jesus knowingly washed the feet of the disciple who would end up betraying him and leading to his death. And this is just such a powerful example of Jesus washed the feet of this sinner, of this person who had nothing but evil in his heart, and yet he still, out of loving goodness, washed his feet. And we see that example then in the ad shown by people who would be at odds in a lot of different areas, one washing the other's feet. And that's a very powerful illustration to the point where they even had towards the end somebody who was clearly of a ministerial position in some way, washing the feet of somebody who was clearly, I guess, a part of the LGBTQ group. And really, in doing this, they're just illustrating Jesus's love that he had, that he would wash somebody who would be on kind of his opposite end, one of his enemies, somebody who would be looking for his harm in order for them to be benefited. But Jesus says, "I'll still wash your feet anyway, out of love for them," and that is what they were trying to show
Hmm.
in that commercial. And I feel like that is a great thing, just to be able to illustrate that love. But so many Christians had an issue with it, either because they thought it wasn't showing, it didn't fully convey Jesus's love enough, or it maybe went too far in saying that, okay, in loving somebody, you're accepting certain things about them. And I think that that's obviously not fully correct either. But um, this is where I think it's important for us to connect this with society and Christianity in general. Because those who are of a deeper faith, as Michael mentioned with that quote, they're going to look, and obviously the culture or those who have a skin deep faith are not going to go as deep as they want them to go.
Hmm.
The reason for this is because once you get to a certain level of faith, you realize how important the depth of your faith is, and you want other people to have that. But for those who are in
Yes.
the world, who are completely separated from Christ, or those who have just a superficial faith, it is going for us to, we're going to feel like it's lacking. But the thing is, you can't get to a deep point without first being in uh, that superficial level, and you can't even get to the superficial level if you have nothing. And so that
Yeah.
ad was trying to draw people who had nothing to at least hopefully a superficial understanding about Jesus, in hopes for things to continue into a deep faith. The problem that I see in our culture is not necessarily with these kind of ads that are trying to bring people from nothing to a superficial understanding. It's that I feel too much in America right now. We have people who have a superficial faith, who wear the name of Christ and never move from that point. And that's where we're having issues, I think, more than
Mm.
anything else.
Yeah, yeah, I could get behind that. And one thing too, just before we move on, what Jesus talked about, what Paul talked about, was we should be loving our enemies and doing good to those who persecute us. So whether or not, or however that person lives their life, we should be treating them well. We should be washing their feet, so to speak. So even if they are an enemy of Christ, a sinner, then just because we're serving them, we're loving them, does not mean we're condoning them. So I don't see the connection that people make with that. We should be treating those who treat us poorly well. We should treat them well. So as we go into something a little bit different, I don't want our words to be misconstrued, and there is still strong support for treating people that are living in open sin, treating them well.
Mm-hmm. And on that, I just want to share this quote from a book I'm about to quote a lot more from. Um, but this quote says, "Instead of sharing God's word like it's water for thirsty friends in a spiritual desert, we're wielding it like it's a weapon against our enemies in a culture war." And I think
Right.
that's very important for us to be able to understand, what is the good news of Jesus Christ about? It's about bringing the lost to Christ, and fill and giving them what they are, what all men are seeking, which is a relationship with God, because it is an innate need that each person has to be in relationship with God. But in too many ways, too many Christians look to use God's word as a weapon against other people who they disagree with, rather than it being the good news, the living water that brings people to God. And that is where
Mm.
we need to make sure that we are cautious about how we are treating people who are in the world, or people who are lost, people who are in their sins. We are not looking to beat them down with God's word, use the God's word as a weapon against them, but instead use it as a surgical knife to hopefully cut away the things in their life that are keeping them from that relationship with God, but first helping them to come to that understanding of the love that God has for them, that he sent Jesus for them and their sake.
Yeah, double-edged sword, and it
Absolutely.
cuts to the heart, the spirit convicts. And so yeah, certainly. So you mentioned also that you see a concerning thing, and it's a trend I see. It's why I wrote the book that I wrote. The trend from moving superficial believers to strong believers. What have you seen from what you read in the book? By the way, it's Don't Hold Back by David Platt, right?
Yes. Yes. I'll go ahead and hold it up for those of you who are watching this visually. This is Don't Hold Back by David Platt. He has wrote multiple books, and he wrote a book quite a few years ago challenging people to get to a deeper faith as well, something that was very important for him. Obviously, something very important for us because it's part of the goal for our discipleship podcast is to move people from a very skin deep faith to a deeper rooted faith, hopefully. And by the way, Michael's book is also called Finding Conviction in the Cross. Is that correct? You can find that on Amazon if you guys wanted to read that as well. But I want to talk about this book a little bit, Don't Hold Back by David Platt, because I think it talks so much about what we are discussing, because there is I think a concerning trend in America. And a lot of times we talk about the concerning trends in America being how much further away from morality the world has gone. Where, me and Mike were both at an event this last weekend, and by the time this comes out, it's been 2 weekends ago. And the speaker was talking about how far we've moved as a country morally from the fact that there was a time in America where a couple could not be shown in a bed together on television, even though they were a married couple. They had to sleep in separate beds, and even that was controversial. To now, you have HBO, which just shows all the nudity in the world you could possibly think about, and all the sex scenes and everything else like that. And this is where we've moved as a society and culture. And so when we talk about where we have moved as a country, that's usually what we talk about, the morality of the world and those outside of it, and we complain about that. But I want to talk about the issue that we have as an American culture within the church, because far too often we have allowed our culture to then dictate how we do things within the church. And what I mean by that is this, not that we're allowing all the sinful things within the culture to take us, but the fact that we have moved as a culture from a more religiously centered society to less. And this has also affected those within the church, because those who call themselves Christians now tend to have far less deep of a faith than they had before. And a lot of this, I think, comes from the fact that we are in the richest country in the history of the world. America today is the richest country in the history of the world. We don't
And I don't
always
even think
feel
it's
that.
close.
And it's not even close. And sometimes we don't feel that. But I promise you that's the case, right? Even in great societies in the past, ancient Rome and things like that, there was this upper class that were uber, uber rich. But even the middle class, they could afford their food for a week, maybe. We've got pantries full of food that could last us a very long time. This is kind of where we're at in society. We are the richest country in the history of the world. And because of this, so often we have accepted what I think we've seen as this kind of comfortable, casual Christianity in exchange for pursuing things in this world that we're told we must have. And David Platt, in his book, Don't Hold Back, calls this the pursuit of the American gospel. And the American gospel is this idea that we need to have, the 5-bed, 3.5 bath house on so many acres in the suburbs with 2 to 4 cars in the driveway, 2.5 kids and a golden retriever or whatever. And this is kind of, and a 6-figure salary and all those sorts of things with a flush 401k and all these sorts of things. And that doesn't mean that it is sinful inherently to have those things. Please do not misunderstand me. But when that is your ultimate pursuit in life, to have that house, to have that 401k, to have those cars, to have these sorts of things, when that is your number one pursuit, and yet you wear the name of Christ, then you have rejected the true gospel of Jesus Christ, which tells us that our hope and our allegiance, our pledge is in one place, that's in Christ Jesus, our King. And we've exchanged that for our hope is built on our 6-figure salary. Our allegiance is set in our 401k. Our allegiance is set on our political party and our political candidates, because they give us the hope of lower gas prices, because they give us the hope of policies that will build up our 401ks. They give us the hope of a better housing market, because that is our main concern, not that the gospel of Jesus Christ is being spread. And he references, and I'll wrap up my part of this discussion with this quote that he says, and be prepared, because this is a big quote that a big statement that he makes, but I agree with it wholeheartedly. He says, "For too long we have traded the biblical gospel that exalts Jesus above everything else in this world for an American gospel that prostitutes Jesus for the sake of comfort, power, politics, and prosperity in our country."
Mm. And it really is taking the focus, like he's saying, away from Jesus and what
Yes.
Jesus called us to. We can be Christians. We can be strong Christians. We could be giants in the faith and not live in America. We could be strong Christians and America fall and crumble, and some other country that you're afraid of conquers the world. And we're going to talk later. It's not that we desire that, but we have anchored and tethered our hope to our nation, or what our
And our
nation
economy,
offers us.
yes, our
Yes, yes,
economy,
yes.
our all the
The
benefits,
wealth,
yes.
anything, whatever it is. And it comes back to who we are. Are we a disciple of Christ first, and all things after that come after that? Um, I've seen the meme that floats around is that, church should be your excuse for missing everything else. But so often everything else gets put ahead and church is relegated to 1 hour a week. We saw something at that event that we went to at Winterfest. We saw someone else said that church is not a place to go and it's not an hour of the week. It's who we are. We are the church. And our country has adulterated, has prostituted Jesus and what Jesus has called us to, and really turned a lot of churches into social clubs. That's the biggest thing. And the last thing I'll say, illustration wise, is I heard a lesson years ago that our churches should be more like battleships and less like cruise ships. We're in a war, a spiritual war, and we're not fighting against people necessarily. We're fighting against the devil, against his demons and spiritual powers of the air.
That's right.
And so we're fighting that. It's not that we're on some luxury cruise liner just looking for comfort, looking for ease, looking for entertainment.
Yeah. And I think that there's a lot to be said about that, from the perspective of so many of us in America we are very comfortable on the cruise liner, on the Christian cruise
Yes.
liner. Like it's part of we have an itinerary, right? And it's hedonism,
Free
hedonism.
buffet.
Yeah, so exactly. It's hedonism, and then hour of church.
Yes. And what is
Okay.
hedonism? This is something that people need to know. Do you want to describe it? You want me to?
Well, yeah, I would say gratification of the flesh,
Yes,
complete
yes.
and total gratification of the flesh. And this has been a philosophy going back all the way to ancient Greece with the Stoics and the Epicureans. Stoicism being the more discipline, and your life is made better by doing the right things at the right times in the right ways. Where the Epicureans were complete hedonists, which is, hey, we're going to enjoy every bit of life as much as possible because we only live once and we don't care about anything after, that kind of thing. And we have, frankly, in America, bought into the hedonism argument, even though we don't necessarily feel that as much. We have to have our this kind of coffees in this kind of cup, living in this kind of house, and these sorts of things. And I'm not to say that I'm not to say, Michael says he maybe had a coffee in a Stanley cup this morning or something like that. And I'm not saying, once
No, no,
again,
no.
the point is not that I'm saying that those things are sinful and wrong. But the fact
Yeah.
is that a combination of that and everything else we have, if that is our center, if that is our God, if we do not make sacrifices, if we miss church because of other things and not other things because of church, if we believe that Christianity, and if we believe that the church is an hour a week or 2 hours a week or 3 hours a week or whatever it is, and it is a box within our larger lives rather than the core and center of our lives in which everything else centers around,
Yep.
then we are losing everything at that point.
Mhm.
And if our full allegiance is not in King Jesus, if our whole lives are not dedicated to him, his gospel, and his mission, if we have allowed other things in this world to take control, whatever that may be, the prosperity gospel, our political gospel, or whatever else it is, if when that happens, then we have given into idolatry. We have accepted a gospel contrary to Jesus Christ. And we have, as that quote says, prostituted Jesus, used him as for what we need him for, we think, right? To make us feel better about eternal destination, while we actually give our entire lives over to the things of this world and the idols of this world. That is how we as a church, so many of us have lost what it truly means to be Christian. And by the way, you want to know why so many are leaving the faith and why the world and specifically our culture in America looks at Christianity the way that it does? Is because that's what our faith has been like. It's been that superficial, skin deep, no roots, idolatry-centered gospel that is not what Jesus showed. And why would the world want to be part of that?
Yes.
Why would the world want to be part of that? And then we're shocked when the culture becomes less and less moral because they don't have a church to look to that is truly the church of Jesus Christ. Now we understand what's going on.
Yeah, and when church is just another activity, another social club, you can choose not to be a part of that group. I mean, it's just plain and simple. But we wanted to end this episode and wind it down with some hope and also opportunities that we have for our country to grow as a for the church to grow in our country. Let me put it that way. Some statistics I shared a few weeks ago at Westwood. According to the Pew Research Center, they have interesting statistics all the time. But in 2007, so 15 years ago, 18 years ago, 17 years ago, 17 years ago, 78. Too much math.
It keeps getting longer every day away from us.
I know. But in 2007, 78% of Americans claimed to be Christians. 5% claimed other religions, and 16% claimed no religion. In 2021, 63% of Americans claimed to be Christians, so a decrease of 15%. 6%, so only 1% more in that 14-year span of 2007 to 2021, claimed other religious affiliation. The greatest number that grew was 29% claimed no religious affiliation. So the number of people, or the segment of the population that's growing the most, is people who claim no religious affiliation. That's running parallel to what also is happening in our country. In 2023, Pew Research Center came out with another study that said that 83% of all people in America, adults, believe people have a soul or spirit. And 70% of people, U.S. adults, consider themselves spiritual in some way. So in our country, people are not being convinced of another faith, that another faith is true or better than Christianity or truer than Christianity, even though it's not, a thing. It's that they're just losing faith and losing religious affiliation altogether. But they're remaining spiritually focused, and so many believe we have a soul and spirit. Well, what is our soul or spirit going to do when we die? So we have an opportunity. I think there's a lot of fertile ground out there. People that just haven't been convinced. It's not that they're completely deluded into believing or they have a strong faith in something else. It's that they've lost it altogether. So that's an opportunity for us to engage people and share with them the good news of Jesus.
Absolutely. I think that's the hope that we can have, because we've talked about, some things that we find to be issues and some hopelessness that we may feel at different times about some different things, concerns that we have about where the church has gone. But I think right there, it shows, you can see the statistics. And again, so we went from 78% of Americans claiming to be Christian in 2007 to 63%. That's if my math's correct, a 15% decrease, right? where we see claiming no religion go from 16% to 29%, which is a 13% increase. Okay, so that means that almost all the people that left Christianity, they didn't convert to Islam, to Buddhism, to any other sort of religion, right? They had just left Christianity.
Yeah.
And so those people probably have Christian roots, Christian foundations, Christian ideas, but they have left Christianity. And what's the main reason why they left Christianity? Well, because they found Christianity wanting. Well, here's the thing. They didn't find Christianity wanting.
Or Christ wanting.
Or Christ wanting. They found the American church wanting.
Yeah.
Right? They found the American church to be lacking. And this is because I feel more than anything about what we talked about earlier, and the fact that so many Christian Americans have given up a deep-rooted faith for a superficial faith that really is a faith centered around the American gospel, around the prosperity gospel, around things of this earth and things of this world. If we, as a church, can fully pledge ourselves again to King Jesus, put our full focus in life on his gospel and telling others about the good news of Jesus Christ, and living as the church in every way, from the time we wake up to the time we go to sleep, 24/7, 365. If we did that, I can promise you, not only can we win back that was it, what did we say, 15% or whatever it was, or no, 13% that has grown in that way. We can win even more, right? We can win even more if that is our goal. If discipleship is our goal, if being built up is our goal, if truly being rooted in faith at all times is our true goal, we can win back those who have left and win even more. This is a guarantee. So have hope, church. We can do these things, but it's not going to be done by somebody else. If you are listening to this podcast and you are a Christian, it's your responsibility. Just like it's my responsibility, just like it's Michael's responsibility. We're the ministers. We're paid for this, blah, blah, blah. It's your responsibility too. If you wear the name of Christ, it is your responsibility. It is every single person's responsibility. Don't count on someone else to do this.
Yeah.
It is all of our responsibilities. And so if you're getting your hair cut and you're talking to the person who's cutting your hair and they say, I used to go to church, but I don't anymore. Ask them why and invite them to your church. Right? Treat them the way that you would want to be treated if you were in their position, because they probably left the faith because of whatever bad experience they had in the church. They found the church lacking. Well, be the church for them. Okay? If you're getting your oil changed and the mechanic comes to talk to you and you mention and you start chit-chatting about something about faith and they tell you something like that they used to believe in, or they used to be a part of church and they're not anymore, be the church. Right?
Yeah.
If you're a coworker, if you're sitting around at lunch or around the water cooler or whatever, and that gets mentioned, be the church. Be the church. And I promise you, if you are the church, those conversations will come up.
Yeah.
Because if you are a true Christian to the point where your faith is on display for all to see, and this doesn't mean that you're wearing a cross necklace and you're beating people over the head with the Bible, but people will see that you are different if you are following Christ. Those conversations will happen, and when they happen, if you are being the church to them, you can bring them back to Christ. And that needs to be our mission. And that's what my hope is, our hope is for this podcast going forward, that those who are listening can be empowered to do those things in their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. And one final thing before we go, the children of Israel, or excuse me, the children of Judah were taken into captivity by the Babylonians.
Absolutely.
And at the beginning of that captivity, a prophecy came by Jeremiah. And Jeremiah, God told them through Jeremiah, in Jeremiah 29 and verse 7, he said, "But seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare you will find your welfare." While we're still here on this earth, we are sojourners, we are pilgrims, we don't belong here. Our citizenship is in heaven. We are in exile, if you will. So while we're here, seek the welfare of the state, of the city, the country that you live in. Vote for who you think would best serve our country. Vote for and support who you think, be a good citizen. Seek its welfare. Start businesses, grow businesses, buy land, do things that would help honor God in your community and shine a brighter light. It's not that you should desire that the country that you're in would fail. but that you would seek its welfare, because in its welfare is your welfare. So we hope that you've been encouraged today. I think we have a lot of opportunity, like Dakota said, if we are wearing the name of Christ wherever we're going. If someone sees or hears that you're listening to a discipleship podcast, it could be a way in, an opportunity to talk to people about Jesus. I know I've been talking with people here at Westwood. We've got people that are talking to their coworkers, their friends. We have opportunities every day. All of us have a sphere of influence, people that we can help win for the cause of Christ. So let's take advantage of that. And we thank you for joining us today on the M&M Discipleship Podcast. Until next time, let's look for God, learn from his word, and live out his teachings. Have a good day.